Welcome to 69X Minutes. I'm Erin Molan. It's great to have your company. We are the media now, without filters, fluff, and none of the BS we've been fed for decades. Just the biggest headlines, the boldest investigations, and the wildest stories straight from the X-trenches. Real news, real fast, so let's get into it. Tonight, we sit down with multiple presidents from countries you may not know well, but where the globalist power games are very real, and no one is playing nice. Then in Washington, we chat with a congressman who wants to impeach a federal judge over trying to block Trump's deportations of Venezuelan gangs. The culture war escalates, with kids caught in the middle and public health debates morphing into global fights over control. And as conflicts stretch from Gaza to Eastern Europe, questions grow louder. Has the West lost its will or just its way? And in my take, anyone noticed that climate change has completely gone missing? Politicians are morally bankrupt. This is 69X Minutes. Serbia is experiencing some of its biggest protests in its history after a deadly railway collapse sparked outrage. Thousands have flooded the streets for weeks on end. But this isn't just about one disaster. It is raising questions about corruption, press freedom, and foreign influence. President Aleksandar Vučić is at the centre of it all, balancing ties with the US, Russia, EU talks, and rising pressure at home. Tonight, a preview from Mario's exclusive interview. Here, Vučić responds to the unrest, the media storm, and his next steps to save his country.
You had to take Serbia from where it was during the war and what it's been through for so many years, even decades, and then through alliances, strategic alliances, get it to slowly become wealthier as a nation.
Which was not easy at all.
Which was still in progress.
Today, we hoped at least that this year it was going to be the fastest growing economy in Europe. Now with these protests that are actually creating a lot of hurdles to us, we still believe that we can be one out of 3 best performed countries in Europe this year.
It just needs it after everything it's been through. Many people don't know that the first military campaign by NATO was here in Serbia. It was actually in Bosnia against the Bosnian Serbs. That was the first one. The second one, I think, was Kosovo, Serbia during the Kosovo War.
Yes, but in Bosnia it was a different case. But what was totally done in a totally legal way was that we call it aggression against Serbia that was launched by NATO in 1999 without any permission of UN Security Council. It was a unilateral decision made by NATO, not by United Nations, not by anyone else. 19 countries participated in that. They attacked one small country that didn't have any chances but to defend itself. But the main problem was that they wanted to do it in order to be helpful to Kosovo Albanians to secede from Serbia.
I think you're facing what some call your biggest challenge yet. 100 to 300,000 people on the streets.
There is a mutiny, an unrest organized by wealthy and mainly rich people, a false elite that are not happy because they are not in power.
When you look at protests like this, is it fair to say they were funded or they were encouraged by foreign organizations?
The majority of the people were not paid by someone from outside. It means almost nothing because they cannot recognize the influence they are exposed to. When they watch the media platforms of United Group, they really believe that I was a part of that big drug dealing affair of Jovanjica, which I have never known anything about. But they were pursuing that campaign for 3 years. And after 3 years, just in one day, they were saying, okay, it was not true. It is not really connected with Vučić and his family. But for 3 years, you were persecuting, chasing myself and my family with pure lies. It doesn't mean that you are paid by someone, but these medias are paid by someone from outside as well. It works for years. You create a total network and everything else. When you see that you don't have political parties that are able to oppose to the parties in the government, then you create your own network through different NGOs in every single small city to raise the resistance movements and everything else, in order to use it. There are no demands for anymore.
Because you're saying that you've
No, it's not
fulfilled.
about us. Yeah, we did it, but they don't mention it even.
But then how would you solve it? Because I think if they're frustrated by corruption in Serbia, I think there is corruption in Serbia. I think Serbia, after the wars it's been through, it's hard not to have.
I think there is corruption all over the world.
Having gone through what you've achieved in the last 13 years, even prior to that, but mainly the last 10 years or so, you've been very strategic in putting Serbia's interests first. The way you've dealt with China, the way you've dealt with the US, the way you've even dealt with President Biden. I've seen the way you've communicated with them, but you've also described Serbia's relationship with those countries. So I think the people's frustrations are fair, but then what is the solution in your opinion? So they have a few demands. You said you've fulfilled some of those demands to a certain extent, but then how would you be able to solve those frustrations?
It's not going to be easy because there has been huge expectations raised among those people that were protesting, and they believe that it was an ongoing revolution. It's just a matter of time when we're going to overthrow that bastard, which is myself. They want to overthrow me, and that's it. And that's the only reason why they are not finishing their protests.
Your term ends in 2 years. They can vote for whoever they want in the ballot boxes, correct?
But they don't want to vote because they cannot win any elections. They cannot win any elections. Because if you really believe that there was 300,000, if you really believe that there was 1 million or 1.6 million, which I saw in different type of social networks, posts or whatever, then something's wrong with you. It shows that you live somewhere out of reality and you don't want to accept the reality and everything else. I do accept reality. I don't lie to myself. It's a huge number of people that is protesting all over Serbia. Huge. And I do respect that. And I know how it goes, and I know that today numbers are much smaller than they used to be 2.5 months ago. Much smaller. But nobody wants to recognize it because they don't want to live in reality. It was like a protest tourism, because there are rich people. You had in Niš around 11,000 people coming from Belgrade. Nice walk, nice stroll, good tourism, fantastic Instagram images. I believe that there is an ongoing investigation in this country, and I cannot reveal some facts because, to tell you the truth, I don't know everything. But what I heard is going to be a lot of issues regarding money laundering and everything else. Of course, there were good things they were doing, but there were very bad things they were doing as well. And now it's time to scrutinize it and to expose it to the world. And I think that it'll be good for the other nations, for the other people to see.
Here in Argentina, President Milei declassifies Nazi red lines. These are post-World War II escape routes used by war criminals fleeing to Argentina. Under President Juan Perón, Argentina facilitated these escapes, offering refuge and financial support via Swiss banks. U.S. Senator Charles Grassley, leading a Senate Judiciary Committee investigation, has probed Credit Suisse ties to Nazi-linked accounts. In February this year, Grassley requested Argentine President Javier Milei to declassify files on Nazi red lines. Milei immediately agreed, promising transparency into Argentina's role as a haven for hundreds of Nazis, including Adolf Eichmann and Joseph Mengele. The declassified archives, expected to detail banking transactions and logistics, aim to expose this dark chapter, ensuring accountability and historical clarity nearly 80 years later. This is Argentina's Milei News, and that's your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Robby Starbuck took a stand. He says DEI, gender ideology and censorship are all part of the same war on truth. As a Cuban American, he says his own kids benefit unfairly from DEI, and that's exactly why it has to go. Flagged during the 2020 election for posting facts, he's now calling for an Internet Bill of Rights. Is this about equality or control? Robby shares why he's not backing down.
My pitch to companies has been fairly simple. Look, you've been a prisoner to politics every 4 years. And as long as you accept that position of being a prisoner to politics every 4 years, you're going to continue to have this sort of push and pull between activist bases and consumers being angry at you for this, that, or the other reason. And maybe it does shift. You know, maybe I see us as ascendant, and I think we have a great opportunity as a political movement to have, you know, serious control for a long time. But maybe we don't, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the left comes into power in 4 years. If you're a company, you really need to stake your position on corporate neutrality so you're no longer a prisoner to politics. And that means essentially be a company nobody can be mad at, right? So get out of the divisive political games and just focus on making a great product with great service. Because if you do that, people cannot be mad at you. When they come knock at your door and want you to back whatever political issue it is that they back, you say, you know what, we love having you as a customer. We don't get involved in politics that don't relate to the direct regulatory environment of our business. And it's that simple, right? And so CEOs have been enormously actually open to this after they've seen the fallout of, you know, what's happened at John Deere, Tractor Supply, Harley Davidson, and Bud Light. You know, they don't want to be that next story. All we've done is we've stated the many different side effects that scientifically are accurate. We've stated the inability of a young person to make that fully informed decision when their brain hasn't formed yet in very, very, very important ways. We've pointed out the hypocrisy of the fact that we don't allow children to make other life-altering choices like that, but we allow them to make these life-altering choices. You know, I think that should be very clear to people that there's a disconnect when we don't allow them to buy cigarettes because they're too young and sort of unable to make a rational adult decision, but we allow them to make decisions about destroying their ability to have children when they're older. We allow them to make decisions about chopping their breasts off when they're like 13, 14 years old. That's nonsensical, you know? So as the adults in the room, we have choices to make, and we're going to look at what was done during this time period where you've got double mastectomies for little teenage girls, the same way we look back at like what the Aztecs did. It's barbarism, you know? And so you can't pretend to be the good guy, pretend to have the moral high ground when you're chopping off the breasts of 13-year-old girls. That's just, you know, that's a fact for the rest of humanity. If you're doing that, you're a part of it, you're assenting to it, you're saying this is okay. In fact, you're saying it's morally right. You are not a good person. You never will be. In any semblance of any society ever, you will never be the good guy. I don't care how many people pretend that you are. You're not. And so, you know, the other thing too about the statistics based around how many kids are identifying as LGBTQ+. Cool. So let's wait 20 years and let's see what those numbers look like. When you look at the actual habits of these kids, they don't point toward this gigantic, you know, sort of shift from what the norm has been. It points more to a desire to be socially accepted. The kids understood, because they're very smart, that people were being treated differently if they pretended to take on these victimhoods, right? And so we created the mess for these kids, and frankly, we need to help them get out of it. I'm Cuban. My family's from Cuba. I'm Latino. I actually benefit from DEI policies. My kids have a better chance of getting into schools and getting scholarships and getting jobs than white children do of those white progressives. And the irony is not lost on me. All they have to do, my kids, is check a box that says Latino instead of checking the box that says white, like their mom, my wife. And my kids lose that advantage when you get rid of DEI. I'm saying that's the right thing to do because it is unfair and wholly racist that my kids get an unearned benefit simply because they can check a box that says Latino. So if you're in that middle point and you're kind of non-political, always look at incentives and reality, okay? Is it sensical in any way that somebody who is Latino, whose family immigrated here, would be racist against Latinos because they want to get rid of it? It just doesn't make sense, right? Like the math doesn't add up. They just lost their top sales pitch, which is to call us all racist Nazis. And so I think that I encourage people to use common sense, be rational, don't think emotionally. You know, when they call Elon Musk a Nazi, maybe ask some questions, you know, maybe see how far that thinking really has gone and see if it jives with what you're able to sort of understand from using your own brain. In the 2020 election directly afterward, Stanford and the Election Integrity Partnership, which is Orwellian name, is Orwellian as they come, they identified what they called the largest disinformation spreaders on the internet. And it was all Republican or right-wing accounts. They were able to escape any culpability for what they did because, I mean, it was just smearing us. You know, the stuff that I was able to get a hold of through Jim Jordan and his office, some of the things that were reported as supposed misinformation on my account were things like saying, hey, double check that your ballot goes through the tabulator. It's a wholly legal thing to say. It's not saying your vote is not being counted or whatever. Like, it was literally just a statement saying, hey, do that. It's an extra way you can feel comfortable knowing your vote was counted. And it was things like that. And there was literally not one post that was misinformation. There was not one post that you could fact check in the future. Every single one was correct and factual. And yet I was put on that list by the EIP in connection with how they did this. I think you've got to have a legislative environment that looks at this very harshly and creates penalties for the censorship of private citizens. And I think we also need an Internet Bill of Rights, one that makes it very clear that we have the ability to do these things and that the freedom of the press extends to us as well, because many of us are doing journalism in more ways than the actual legacy media is doing or has done in recent history. And, you know, I think a lot of these protections have been sort of loosely applied, but we need it concrete. We need a very concrete, you know, sort of way to say, hey, you can't do this. And I think an Internet Bill of Rights is the way to get that done.
President Dodik is a leader on the run. He says the global elite have targeted him, punishing his refusal to let foreign forces reshape Bosnia's judiciary. Now the pressure, well, it's gone global. Interpol has just issued a red notice, turning a political standoff into an international pursuit. But with over 65% approval at home and a defiant message to his critics, he's not running. He is digging in.
Basically, the globalist liberal elite in the world, the one that working on destroying the entire world, and we can see them maybe in the best and most famous way to the Biden's administration, the people of the Biden's administration, that who didn't respect any of our customs. They brought this German citizen and says he is a high representative. In the Dayton Peace Accords, it says that if you are even high representative in the form of that function, you need to be confirmed by the UN Security Council, and that doesn't exist. It wasn't confirmed by UN Security Council. So this is the old Biden's administration structure, and the swamp, the globalist swamp of Brussels, of the institutions of Brussels, and they don't accept even President Trump. And I can just say that basically those remnants of the ex-administration, those who were appointed by the ex-administration, they are leading those processes right now against me and in this case. What we have today and what's the scene here is that we have foreigners in our Supreme Court that can be appointed by itself. And also we have a high representative, the office that proclaim that they can introduce new laws, even it's not in our constitution, it's nowhere. They just issue a decree and says who goes against it, it's against the law of Bosnia and Herzegovina. When I arrived to Israel on Wednesday, I arrived normally with no international red warrant or anything, a red notice warrant. And they found out that I'm in Israel and this conference. And this morning they issue the basically arrest warrant through the Interpol and to make it. I basically just found out to their media. They first go to the media and I didn't even receive anything officially. I just saw it as a public news already. Those people who now issue those arrest warrants are the same people who are supporting right now Hamas in Sarajevo and those terrorist attacks. How that worked is basically they use from the beginning a step-by-step approach in which they introduce some new body that was almost like an NGO body, and then they start giving it more power. So now, 30 years later, where we are, these, especially the Office of the High Representative, they assume the control in the form that they can issue a directive, and then the judiciary system needs to obey that. So the thing is that they also decided to obey and use it because many of these prosecutors and judges are also composed of the Muslims. So they just, in my case, also started this procedure after the man who represents himself as a high representative issued that who doesn't obey his orders are committing a criminal offense in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in the constitution, there is no such a thing as an office of high representative, but there is an office of the president of the Serbian Republic. So this non-existent office now issued an order for my persecution for the office that exists in the constitution, and also the Supreme Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's not in the constitution. This is possible. How can that be that a foreigner can come to your country and just saying to the system of the judiciary, you need to obey my decisions without even any legal framework? Basically, they don't want to bring one specific person. They just want to, to bring people that can change quickly, and they don't have any power influence in the nation. So what's happened is I supported during the first election, I supported President Trump before he was elected, and They then decided when he was elected, but before the transition, to issue the sanctions. That's the beginning. So the previous administration issued a sanction, and now they continue that in that shape and form. So what's happening now are basically the remnants of the old structure administration through the U.S. Embassy that are acting. Is that he is putting a jeopardy into the Dayton Peace Accord, that he is putting the peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina into some type of jeopardy, which is a lie. There's no conflict in Bosnia. Very simple for you to understand. When President Trump says that the ex-Biden administration caused a huge harm to the people of the United States, you can just imagine how much more of evil they cause to places like Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we have many friends in Europe. Many political parties are supporting us. We are close friends. Alternative for Germany, Freedom Party from Netherlands, and especially the government of the Prime Minister Viktor Orban from Hungary. So we have friends, and they're supporting us and understanding us, but the problems are very difficult. So my main problem right now is that we have a German citizen who at this moment is trying to present himself as a high representative, but he wasn't confirmed. And another thing is that this man that claims that he is a legal high representative, who is now in Sarajevo, is receiving 26,000 euros per month of salary for his services, mostly financed from the funds of the US aid. So he basically, as we said before, he introduced this new law in which he says, who doesn't obey me, then he's a criminal. And then the Muslim courts and the judicial system take this as a legal framework and saying he's not representing, supporting the decisions of the high representative. So this is a criminal act. You cannot go against it. And there is no such a thing as not obeying the high representative in any of the Bosnian laws or constitution, only in his decree that he issued and send them to the prosecution and the judiciary system. I just said, but I cannot respect in that form and shape a man who doesn't have a mandate of UN to be a high representative. And that is my blame. That's all my blame. I won more than 10 election cycles in a row. I can tell you that I can win another 10 times. But now what they issued also, it's a permanent ban from being a candidate for the next elections because of that. They said, according to this verdict now, that I'm banned from the political office for the next 6 years, and probably going to just expand that through the judiciary system in the further. My problem is because I became a strong leader in my nation, and they don't like those people. That's why they done everything they could to make life miserable for President Trump before. And now they're just doing that to me and to all of these people. The last polls says that we're above 65% of the citizens. If I was at 10%, I would not have this problem for sure.
Rep. Eli Gill wants a federal judge impeached. Why? For blocking Trump's move to deport suspected gang members under a wartime law. Are judges now rewriting the law from the bench? And what happens when one branch overrules the other? Gill says it's not just about immigration, it's about power. His warning? Stop this now or risk a constitutional collapse.
You filed articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg. We've seen a lot of lawfare. Of course, we've talked a lot about lawfare over the last 4 years almost. Now it seems that lawfare has spread throughout the world. Here in the United States, we are now fighting back against lawfare, but yet we're not done with it.
I was furious whenever I saw that, not only because it was a flagrant politicization of the courts and usurpation of judicial authority of the executive, but this is so egregious here. These are alien enemy terrorists who were brought into our country by Joe Biden, who are murdering and raping and pillaging American citizens, and who not only do some of the most heinous and grotesque crimes against our people, but take sadistic pleasure in torturing their victims. These are truly the worst of the worst that President Trump was getting the heck out of our communities. That's exactly what President Trump was elected to do. Remember, border security and mass deportations were, if anything, the singular issue of the 2024 election. And this judge has the audacity to step in and act as commander-in-chief himself, to go so far as demand that President Trump turn a plane around midair full of these terrorists and drop them off on American soil. Did that judge have any care about the American citizens who have been dying from these thugs? Did he know anything about the bilateral operations and negotiations between the United States and El Salvador that had been going on for weeks that facilitated this process? Did he know anything about the crews on the planes or the pilots, or what was going to happen once these terrorists got back to American soil. He didn't know any of that, and he doesn't have the power to know it. That is so far beyond his authority. That's for the commander-in-chief. And yet he still ordered it anyways. These are Democrats who are going out of their way to make our communities less safe and less secure and put some of the most evil people in the world right in our backyard. It's wrong, and that's why I was so enraged whenever I saw this decision. We almost immediately filed the impeachment articles because this is a rogue, activist, left-wing lunatic judge who unconstitutionally and unlawfully usurped the executive's plenary Article 2 constitutional authority to act as commander-in-chief of the United States. That means that he has the power, the non-justiciable power, meaning not subject to judicial review, to conduct our foreign policy and to repel an invasion. That's power that is also codified and explained in the Alien Enemies Act. And this judge abused his power, went far beyond his prerogative to weaponize the courts against this administration, to politicize the judiciary, and forced a constitutional crisis. That's wrong. But the core issue here is that this judge is specifically attacking President Trump, and he knows that what he's doing is lawless and unconstitutional, but these rogue judges don't care. They also know that even if this ruling gets overturned on appeal, that appellate process could take months or even years, burning valuable time off the clock of the Trump presidency. He knows that we're in the first 100 days. This is the most important time of President Trump's presidency, and that's why he knows if he can burn the clock out, he gets a win whether this gets overturned or not. That's wrong. The process itself, in other words, is the judicial coup. This is a prerogative of Congress to impeach rogue activist judges who are violating the terms of our Constitution, as this judge is. That is a core part of the separation of powers and checks and balances, is that there's oftentimes a little bit of tension between the branches, and whenever the judiciary oversteps their authority, it is our prerogative, our right, I think our obligation, to put them in check. They also have the power at times to put us in check and to put the executive in check, but this is so far beyond their authority, we have an obligation to act. That's a core part of our system. Impeachment is one potential remedy. I think that it is just and that it is proper in this case, and I hope that we go that route. But there are other options as well. Next week, we're going to be voting on a bill by Representative Issa that limits circuit court judges, or it stops circuit court judges from issuing nationwide injunctions. So it limits their jurisdiction. There are other ways we can limit their jurisdiction as well, related to temporary restraining orders, which was the case in this case here. We can go the financial route. We can start defunding courts or defunding individual rulings according to the law. So there are a lot of different routes we can go, but we do have leadership now in Washington who's going to be pursuing this aggressively. And I'm excited to see where this goes from here. You know, we had a secure border under President Trump in his first administration, and Joe Biden unleashed the floodgates of illegal aliens coming into our country for 4 years. We think that somewhere north of 15 million illegal aliens came into our country, including terrorists, people from all over the world. We've seen border apprehensions drop by over 95% already since Trump has gotten into office. As he mentioned, we didn't need new laws. We just needed a new president who would enforce the laws that were on the books and who was actually looking out for the American people. You know, we see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle too often are interested in advancing the interests and the agenda of illegal aliens over American citizens, putting our people at risk. There's a fundamental question of who does Washington represent? Does it represent the interests of illegal aliens or the American people? So many Republicans even have run on securing the border and didn't do a single thing President Trump did. That's promises made, promises kept.
Hello and welcome back to your weekly crypto update on 69X. Kraken announced a massive deal to acquire NinjaTrader for $1.5 billion, aiming to upgrade its trading platform. On the investment side, France's state bank, BPI France, announced a €25 million investment into smaller cryptocurrencies. DeFi lending platform Abracadabra, known for letting users borrow stablecoins using interest-bearing tokens, lost $13 million in a flash loan attack. The incident highlights ongoing vulnerabilities in decentralized finance protocols. In regulatory news, Paul Atkins, President Trump's nominee for the new SEC chair, signaled a pro-crypto stance during his Senate banking panel confirmation hearing. He has been an outspoken critic against Gary Gensler, the former SEC chair, and declared digital assets a top priority. And in a shocking turn, crypto influencer BitBoy, also known as Ben Armstrong, was reportedly arrested after a live stream confrontation. He faces charges related to trespassing and harassing a judge. And that's it for this week's market recap on 69X. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
With over 41 million Americans on SNAP, lawmakers are debating whether taxpayer dollars should cover soda and junk food, or whether it's time to cut the sugar. Robert Kennedy Jr. calls it poison. Trump, well, he drinks it from a wine glass. Now, Eric Bolling unpacks the battle between public health and personal freedom, as the soda lobby braces for a full-blown war in DC. This is big soda versus big government, and the fizz is just getting started.
You know, President Trump always said that among his goals was making America healthy again. It's why he brought RFK Jr. on board. Here's RFK Jr. just this week.
Streamlining HHS is part of a shift to new priorities, especially ending the chronic disease epidemic with clean water, safe food, effective medicine, good science, radical transparency, and a healthy environment.
Well, now going on, there's a massive debate about whether federal subsidies should be used to buy unhealthy foods, including sugary sodas and ultra-processed foods like candy bars, chips, etc., via food stamps. Food stamps, or what we call SNAP, are a major way Americans buy that kind of junk food. And RFK and Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins, as part of solving the healthcare crisis, want to put an end to using food stamps to buy that kind of food. Listen.
I look forward to working with Bobby Kennedy as we figure out, do we have the healthiest choices? So when a taxpayer is putting money into SNAP, are they okay with us using their tax dollars to feed really bad food and sugary drinks to children who perhaps need something more nutritious?
Because those foods contribute to obesity and a whole load of health problems in both kids and adults. Think diabetes, heart disease, some of the leading killers in the country right now. So because most people who use food stamps are also on Medicaid or other government-funded health programs, taxpayers are picking up both tabs. We pay for the soda, and then we also pay for the resulting medical bills. And here's the thing, soda is the item most often purchased with SNAP benefits. Just some numbers here. In 2015 and 2016, obesity-related treatment cost taxpayers about $60 billion per year, and that number has climbed exponentially ever since. Another number, about 23% of food stamp dollars go to things like soda, candy, and chips. That's about $25 billion a year. Cutting the soda out would save health, lives, and money. It'll make this country a lot healthier, MAGA, but also wealthier. MAGA, win-win, right? Aren't we all on the same page here? Maybe not so fast. We now know food companies will fight this and are fighting this. They're in the fight of their lives. These companies have made trillions off soda, literally. So why would these companies ever give up their cash cow? Well, they're not rolling over, and they're doing so with the help of, believe it or not, conservative influencers on social media. Big Soda wants billions of our tax dollars, and they're paying influencers to fight for them. What you're seeing on the screen are posts from conservative influencers, and what do we see? Government overreach and President Trump with a Diet Coke on his desk, bringing up how New York tried to curb soft drinks and failed. And what's this yet again? Government overreach. And President Trump holding what? A can of Diet Coke. And another one, President Trump with Diet Coke. Let the people decide for themselves, they say. The New York reference again. And yet again, government overstep, oddly similar messaging. So what's happening here? Scandalous, frankly disgusting. These are so-called MAGA influencers taking money from big soda giants, hurting Americans, and all in the name of making a buck. But they're also abusing very key and important conservative principles in the name of it. I take government reach very seriously. I'm a conservative. I'm a libertarian, staunchly against government overreach. The difference here is obvious. In New York, they tried to stop people from drinking soft drinks by taxing the drinks, par for the course in what's become one of the more socialist cities in this country. But this is not the same thing. American taxpayers are giving that money to the millions who collect SNAP payments, and we also foot the bill for the medical bills that results from eating and drinking that stuff. That makes this anything but government overreach. In fact, it falls squarely into the Doge initiative, cutting the fat, literally. Spend your money as you see fit. The government should never be involved there. But my money, your money, our money, that's an entirely different story. They say RFK is dangerous to our health. Dangerous. That's what they always say when someone threatens the status quo, or even more importantly, threatens profits. RFK Jr. is not a danger. The real danger is that power, money, greed, and control are more important than our health. They don't care if we're sick as long as they make their big bucks, big soda. And that is more certainly absolutely worth questioning. Big soda is panicked right now, using any and every trick up their greedy little sleeves. Follow the panic, and the real answers are never too far behind. I just never thought those who pretend to be in the fight with us, MAGA, will be letting us down so badly. Screw the American people. Doesn't sound very MAGA to me, but I guess following the money was more important, and the battle goes on. For 69 minutes, I'm Eric Bolling.
Hi, my name is Scott Adams. I'm host of the Scott Adams Show. I'd like to talk a little bit about Ukraine and the opportunity for peace, because it seems like the West and the G7 nations, EU and NATO, have been reluctant for peace. And their expansion actually has caused the reaction that nobody wanted from Russia. And, we're in this conflict. We have Trump as the leader of the free world now, with the new leadership in the United States, pushing and advocating for peace. And we also have someone like J.D. Vance that gave one heck of a speech in Munich at the Security Summit, in Paris at the AI Summit.
AI systems developed in America are free from ideological bias and never restrict our citizens' right to free speech.
And talking about censorship and some other things that were related to democracy and everything that we're defending. This is Scott Adams, and that is your 69 seconds.
The United States believes that Iran is days away from nuclear capability. Let me say that again. Days away. That should strike fear into the hearts and minds of every single person in the world. This is utterly terrifying. Are we taking this seriously enough? It doesn't appear so. What's going on behind the scenes that we may not know about? So many questions, and here to give us some answers, former IDF spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus. I want to start by asking your reaction to that news regarding Iran and its nuclear capability. Is that surprising to you? Is that quicker than you might have thought?
Unfortunately, it isn't surprising. And I think that the Iranian regime has been on the path of achieving nuclear military capabilities for a long, long time. And I won't be able to vouch for the specific accuracy. And there's also a bit of conflicting reports within the US system. Some intel officials claim otherwise. But the bottom line for me is very clear. The Iranian regime is on its way to achieving nuclear military capabilities. The world has been trying to use diplomacy and negotiations and sanctions for the better part of around 15 years. Yet here we are. We have a fundamentalist, crazy regime that is very close to achieving nuclear military capabilities, and that will change the balance of security and the political balance in the Middle East and probably in the world. And that's something that needs to be prevented by any means necessary.
We've just come off the back of 4 years of complete lack of action in any way, shape or form under the Biden administration when it came to Iran. He was asked, are you worried? He said, they know not to do anything. A week later, they kill US troops. We've now got an administration who is actually backing up what they are saying. They're attacking the Houthis at the moment. A lot of chatter out there that the US has its eyes on Iran to do something practically, physically. What's your read on that?
So the way I see it is that there are negotiations, there's signaling, there's communications, US president, the Iranians, Israel. and everybody are still posturing and indicating to the other side their ability to take military action. The Iranians have been exposing new missile bases, and they've been touting new capabilities that they developed, whether it's drones or missiles or naval capabilities, and you can see a steady drip of those messages and announcements by the Iranians. The point of that is that they're signaling that if you try to attack us militarily, we'll be able to retaliate, and we have the ability to destabilize the Middle East. But Israel is ready, has the capabilities, has proven twice already that it can penetrate Iranian air defenses, and it can deliver ordnance wherever it needs to do so in Iran. And the US has been moving assets and capabilities closer to the theater of operations in the Middle East, and also indicating that if negotiations don't go well as President Trump wants, then there is a willingness and a military capability to use the military option. Bottom line of all that, we're still in the negotiation stage, and I think that President Trump is using Israel as the stick in this equation, telling the Iranians that if you don't go ahead and come to the table and agree to disarm completely of your nuclear capabilities and agree to immediate, full, comprehensive inspections of each and every facility that is related to nuclear matters in Iran, then the other option is the Israelis, and the Israelis are ready to go.
So, Jonathan, we're talking about the potential nuclear capability of a place like Iran. Why doesn't Israel have nuclear capability?
Well, Israel has a policy of ambiguity on that matter, which is quite a few years old, and it's designed to keep Israel's enemies guessing about Israeli strength and military capabilities. I think most of our enemies assess that Israel has nuclear capabilities, and I think that they understand that if Israel is brought within an existential threat, Israel would be able to use those capabilities. Reportedly, and I think our enemies understand, Israel also has the ability to what's referred to as second strike, even if, God forbid, Israel should be attacked by nuclear weapons and suffer a tremendous blow, then Israel still has the tools available to retaliate against whoever fired at Israel. Whether that's true or not, I can't say, but I can say that I believe that is what our enemies understand. And I think that what's important here is that we in the world, I think the global interest should be to prevent further the development of an additional arms race in the Middle East. The Saudis and the Egyptians and the Turks have already indicated that if Iran goes nuclear, they would desperately want military nuclear capabilities as well, because they understand that there's madmen with their finger on the bottom, and that they cannot tolerate that, and I can understand. And that's a very bad situation because the more countries that have these capabilities, the worse. As such, I think that is one of the main reasons why it should be prevented. And the best way of dealing with the problem is usually preventing it from becoming reality and not dealing with it once it becomes reality.
So what you're saying, Jonathan, is that Israel does have nuclear capabilities?
What I'm saying is that our enemies believe that Israel has nuclear capabilities. I think that's a good belief for them to have. And I think that Israel has proven over the years that it is absolutely has a no-nonsense policy when it comes to defending the state of Israel. Israel has a history of doing what is right and what is necessary for its security, and Israel will do whatever it takes to defend itself.
Is the EU sleepwalking into disaster? Europe talks tough, but without the US, it's nowhere near ready for war. Colonel Richard Kemp says it'll take years, even with billions spent. Ukraine is holding the line with limited NATO help. China, well, that's rising fast. And the West, barely battle ready. Will America walk away from NATO or lead from the front with an America First doctrine? Tonight, Colonel Richard Kemp, combat veteran and global military strategist, joins us for an unfiltered look at what's coming.
President Biden showed nothing but weakness during his term of office in the White House. And that, in my view, triggered and basically encouraged Putin to invade Ukraine. He could see that the Americans under Biden were weak. He knew that there wouldn't be any significant reaction, and there wasn't, from the United States and from the West, and it enabled him to go ahead with it. So that has brought us up to the situation today where we're in a different world. We're under in the Trump era. Trump quite rightly wants to end these conflicts. He wants to end, first of all, the conflict in Ukraine. The conflict either ends in a ceasefire or a frozen conflict. Either way, Russia's in control of a lot of Ukraine's territory, including some of its most important territory. And I think that was predictable. Irrespective of Trump's involvement in it, that was going to happen in that way because, again, going back to President Biden, he refused, as did the European countries, to give Ukraine enough support to enable them to win. They were given a lot of military support, but only enough to defend themselves, not enough to push the Russians back out of Ukrainian territory. But on top of that, there were massive restrictions placed on the Ukrainians as to how they could use this equipment. There's a reason why all this happened in this way, and that's because Biden and the European leaders were terrified of Russia. Putin threatened to escalate the conflict. He threatened to attack NATO countries. He threatened nuclear war, and they believed him. They were intimidated by him. They managed to deter themselves by Russia's words. And if that hadn't happened, if they'd have actually pushed much more of this stuff and released Ukraine from these terrible restrictions on it, then I think we could have seen a different perspective now. But we are where we are. A lot of people are highly critical of President Trump's relationship, or what they perceive as his relationship with Putin. If Trump wants to persuade Putin to reach an agreement, albeit not a very good one for Ukraine, but if Trump wants to do that, he can't be attacking Putin. He's got to be talking to both sides. It's a terrible thing to have to do, but he has to do it. And so I think that will be the way it will unfold. It will get to this point, I think. And don't forget the other thing in Trump's mind, and quite rightly, is that he's got to worry probably predominantly about China. China is probably the greatest threat and potential threat the world has today. Part of his thinking, I believe, in his relationship with Russia, is to try and split Russia off from China. Well, one of the problems, of course, with Russia coming out on top in the Ukraine war, which it looks like it's going to do, one of the problems of that is, of course, that in a way encourages China to be more aggressive, in the same way as the withdrawal from Afghanistan encouraged Putin to be more aggressive. I think this end situation is likely to encourage China to greater aggression, and America has to be ready to counter that. And that's a fundamental reason why it's so important that European countries stand up and control Europe, basically. So the US shouldn't have to worry about Europe. It should be focused on China and the Middle East, and therefore it should leave Europe to the to the interests of the Europeans. The problem with that is that Europe is a very weak geographical region. They do not have the political will to stand up for themselves. And that's something that they're actually, Trump warned the Europeans back in 2018 that they could no longer freeload on the US in NATO. He warned them about that, quite rightly. They didn't take it seriously. Now they are beginning maybe to take it seriously, but I still have my doubts as to whether that will translate into the willingness and the readiness to actually deploy military forces. I don't believe that Western European leaders have the political will to stand up to Russia. And I think the Vice President of the United States, in a speech in Munich a few weeks back, made the point very clearly. He said the European leaders know what they're afraid of, or they know what they need to fight against, but they don't know what they're fighting for. It's now all about some conglomerate called the EU. Who's going to fight for the EU? I don't believe the US is going to withdraw from NATO. It's obviously anything is possible, but I think it's quite unlikely that's going to happen. But that aside, the other NATO countries are far from ready to contend with the situation as described. It's very easy to build a capable and strong armed forces. It's much more difficult, as I mentioned, it's much more difficult to muster the political courage to use that. And it's also very difficult to persuade and convince young people who make up the backbone of any armed forces that they should be willing to fight. President after president after president was haranguing Europe to put more into its own defense, and it never happened. So I do think that whether you like Trump's methods or not, or his rhetoric or anything else, I do think that it appears to be being effective. But I go back to what I said before, which is I still don't believe that he is going to pull out of NATO and leave Europe exposed. I don't think that's going to happen.
Hi, I'm Buzz, decentralized finance and AI founder. AI is hitting warp speed this week, and features are being shipped at a faster and faster pace. The advantage of xAI's Grok has really always been its distribution through X, and this week they doubled down on distribution to another billion users. Both Elon and Pavel Durov confirmed that Grok's integration on Telegram is now live, and xAI didn't just stop there. Grok upgraded its image generation, and its outputs are trending on X, with creators being completely shocked with its improvement. Google's Gemini had a hot week as well, launching its Gemini 2.5 model, and the model's scoring higher on advanced reasoning than any other model in the market right now, including DeepSeek. But in my opinion, OpenAI's ChatGPT really stole the show. They released a new image generation feature powered by GPT-4o, and they expect to triple revenue this year to over $12 billion. These growing revenue numbers are clearly fueling the anticipated $40 billion SoftBank-led funding round into OpenAI. There's an AI gold rush going on, and my advice is to start using these tools now for your daily workflow or get left behind. This is Buzz, and this is your 69 seconds within 69 minutes.
Joe Lindsley has tracked the Devon Archer saga right from the start. Hunter Biden's former Burisma partner was convicted of fraud, then pardoned by Trump, who says he was screwed by the Bidens. Archer testified against the family. Now he's free, and he's speaking out. Joe tells us what it means and what could be coming next for its impact on Ukraine.
Russia. It was all
that dossier.
Bullshit.
It was based on Hunter Biden.
Are we at last cracking the code that has afflicted our politics for so long? Here in Kyiv, amid a new wave of Russian bombings, while people still gather in parks and play soccer, I'm witnessing a startling threat emerging. The entire effort to block Donald Trump from power just might all trace back to Moscow with an assist from the Clintons. Let's take a look at how Ukraine is connected to this story.
Wow. You know what? That's actually, yeah, I've actually never thought of it.
If you caught our report last week, you saw we've been one step ahead of everyone else. We reported how the Moscow-connected energy firm Burisma hired Hunter Biden and Devon Archer, not from Ukraine, but from Russia. And now, amid real explosions here in Ukraine, there were two explosive developments in Washington, D.C. on March 25th. First, President Trump pardoned Devon Archer, Hunter Biden's former business partner. And second, Trump declassified the FBI's internal Crossfire Hurricane documents, the Bureau's now discredited investigation into what the FBI claimed were Trump's ties to Russia. We reported last week here exclusively on Devon Archer's 2023 congressional testimony in which he confirmed that the Burisma deals were signed not in Ukraine but in Moscow. When you understand that detail, a bigger, more sensible picture starts to snap into place. But as we can see in this conversation between former Congressman Devin Nunes and Donald Trump Jr., a lot of people still miss this key piece of information that could help us solve the entire Russia mystery.
Remember the first people to accuse Joe Biden of having nefarious involvement in Ukraine? It was actually leaks from the Clinton campaign when they were trying to keep Biden out of the race for president. So it's almost like they took all these ideas off the shelf. Hey,
they replaced the name here. You know, we're just going to cross out this name and we'll put a Trump personality in there. Honestly, I'm actually shocked I haven't put that together, but you're right. I mean, this was during the time of the Hunter Biden no-show jobs. Like, what was Hunter doing to earn like almost $100,000 a month in Ukraine at an energy company? no energy history, no business history, doesn't speak the language, like doesn't have to show up. Like, I don't know, guys, like, you know.
So once again, Ukraine is the punching bag. But as Devon Archer testified, he met Burisma's CEO not in Ukraine, but in Moscow in 2014. That Burisma CEO, Mykola Zlochevsky, was part of the pro-Kremlin Yanukovych regime that Ukrainians ousted in 2014. Zlochevsky is a deep state energy oligarch who fled to Moscow and then from Moscow tried to claw back power over Ukraine, in part by hiring the son of Joe Biden. According to former Congressman Nunes, Hillary Clinton, trying to knock Joe Biden out of the 2016 race, used an early version of the now discredited Steele dossier in order to target the Biden's Burisma ties. But that dossier, among other things, falsely claimed that Burisma was Ukrainian. Either Hillary's team were sloppy, or they got played by Russia, or worse, they were in on it. Because as we've shown here repeatedly, Burisma's CEO was a fugitive from Ukraine hiding in Moscow, trying to restore the old pro-Kremlin regime.
Everything the Democrats do. I mean, that's the, you know, Saul Alinsky rules for radicals. Like, accuse them of doing the things that you're actually doing.
When Joe Biden dropped out in 2016 and Trump and Hillary became the main rivals, the Clinton team seemingly recycled the Steele dossier, swapping Biden's name for Trump's.
We're just going to cross out this name and we'll put a Trump personality in there. Just mix and match, mix and match. Honestly, I'm actually shocked I haven't put that together, but you're right.
So why does this matter here in Ukraine? Well, the American frustration over deep state corruption gets wrongly pinned on the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have been caught in the crossfire, so to speak, and the real stories, the actual reality here, gets ignored. 3 years in, Ukraine has Europe's most powerful and innovative army, an army that actually can teach a lot to the United States. And at sea, Ukrainian marine drones have revolutionized warfare, forcing Putin's fleet to retreat from Crimea and much of the Black Sea. Ukraine pulled this off without a navy, and that victory is now being buried under Moscow's calls for a Black Sea ceasefire, when there really is no fire to cease in the Black Sea because of Ukraine's success there. Moscow wants to return to the 2022 UN brokered deal. But here's what no one in Washington seems to notice. By fighting back, Ukraine is now exporting more grain than it did when it had that so-called negotiated deal with the United Nations. As long as America wrongly associates Ukraine with Biden corruption, Americans won't see these strengths and realities from Ukraine. And here in Kyiv, I can tell you that Ukraine's government does not understand the MAGA world, just as MAGA sees Ukraine as hopeless because Joe Biden made it look that way. So we come back to the pardoned men, Hunter Biden and Devon Archer. What do they know? What can they tell us? The Clintons used Fusion GPS to dig into Hunter Biden's ties to Moscow. He'd been making money from Russian contacts since at least 2012. And here's another kicker. Joe Biden's pardon of Hunter only covers activity back to 2014, the year of the Burisma deal in Moscow. But the Moscow money to Hunter began 2 years earlier, with payments from the wife of Moscow's mayor. That's not covered by the presidential pardon. Will Kash Patel investigate? This is Joe Lindsley reporting, as I have every day since 2022 from Ukraine.
What happens when AI stops learning from us and starts thinking like us? Ben G joins us for a sneak peek into Uncanny Valley, where the path to artificial general intelligence raises bigger questions. Where does intelligence end and consciousness begin? Can machines ever mirror the human mind or, terrifyingly, surpass it entirely? Full episode drops Friday only on X.
I don't think that robotics or any particular form of embodiment is necessary for AGI. If you're aiming to make a human-like AGI, then a vaguely human-like embodiment is very convenient for a number of different reasons. It lets us draw on analogy to the human mind more robustly, right? I mean, the human mind is the intelligent system we understand best. We don't understand it that well, but we understand it better than others, right? And I mean, our minds evolved in large part to control our bodies. So, I mean, having an AGI mind controlling a vaguely human-like body gives us a lot to go on. The other key point is once robots work better, and we seem to be close, then putting our would-be AGI systems in robots lets these systems cruise around in the human world and interact with us, interact with the same things that we're interacting with, right? My friend Pei Wang, a longtime symbolic AI researcher, he wrote a paper once called "A Laptop is a Body." The point being that, okay, yeah, your AI system does need to interact with the physical world somehow, especially if us humans are going to deal with it all, but it's not like there's really much of a choice, right? So it's more like, what are the sensors and what are the actuators, right? And how important is it the sensors and actuators are human-like instead of like the camera and microphone, or instead of sending, packets across network connections. Another anecdote about that, I was giving a talk once about embodied versus non-embodied AI. And after the talk, some lady come up to me talking about, I'm so excited someone's really working on like disembodied AI. You mean like poltergeists, right? Like AIs that are in energy clouds floating around. And I've encountered many of them, right? So, but I pointed out to her, this was not really a disembodied AI, right? I mean, the poltergeist was embodied in some conglomeration of ball lightning or something that was hovering around her living room, sending psychic messages to her. It was a different kind of body, but it was not no body, right?
Well, it's the most obvious question that nobody can answer appropriately without giving a bunch of vague disclaimers, which is, what is AGI? Like, how are we all going to come to the same definition of AGI?
I think it doesn't need to have a same definition. I think that's just a little silly. I mean, that's like, you can criticize biologists for not having a precise definition of what is life, right? And okay, we don't, but it's not holding back biology research terribly much. The virus may be halfway between life and not alive, and some synthetic organism may have some characteristics of life and not others. And is a digital life form really alive? I mean, these are sort of interesting to discuss. It's not holding back progress. And I mean, in art, you don't have a rigorous definition of what's beautiful or aesthetic art or what isn't. You can still make a painting or compose a piece of music. So it's not that exploring these definitional issues is a dead end or is pointless, but they don't need to be really precisely resolved any more than you need to define like what is love to fall in love with someone.
The most important question is, will we be able to get to AGI in our lifetimes?
I think we're a few years away. I think we're very close. So yeah, in the next couple of years, we'll see logic systems, we'll see evolutionary learning, we'll see algorithmic chemistry, for that matter. We'll see a bunch of other historical AI paradigms start to strut their stuff in an unprecedented way, because of the same reasons, more compute and more data, right? I would say, as well as conservatism about going into new paradigms rather than recycling what's sort of working, from a business standpoint, big tech companies have a large negative incentive to pursue this. There's already very little moat for them, right? But at least there's the moat of needing shitloads of money, right? So if you go to alternate paradigms that don't even need all these server farms and data, then what moat do they have at all? The narrow focusing on this one little class of architectures and algorithms, it's as much about business as it is about science. And that's it's inevitable that was going to become the way once AI became big time. I think within the next, let's say, 1 to 3 years, either my own team or some other crazy team is going to make a big breakthrough. Once that happens, everyone will jump on top of it very quickly. I mean, it happens. Everything I'm doing is open source and published. But even if it's not, like, staff will be raided, things will be leaked, right? And I think that will get us to AGI by Ray Kurzweil's projected timeline of 2029. And this will be quite amazing from a science and engineering view. I'm optimistic it will lead to a beneficial outcome. I'm worried about how human society deals with the transition period, like between getting to a human level AGI and getting to a putative beneficial superintelligence that will provide all the goodies we want and not try to boss us around too much. Like the transitional period in there seems quite troublesome, particularly in the developing world.
Now it's time for my take. Can someone please explain to me where the climate change warriors have gone? In just a few years, the panic has almost completely subsided. We've gone from mass rallies and thunderous outrage to, well, barely a peep. Governments building campaigns solely around it, businesses clamouring to get on board, and individuals grandstanding and big-noting that they were leading the charge. In Europe, the progressive elites made it their catch cry, but even the most staunch of advocates has been, well, quiet of late. Even Greta Thunberg has shifted to wearing a keffiyeh and screaming to stop arms sales to Israel. It's almost as if it was more for political purposes or agenda-driven than out of a deep, genuine care for the environment, though I'm not saying that for certain. Take the Democratic Convention 4 years ago, for example, where global warming and climate change was practically the entire theme, referenced on stage and in the media en masse. But last year, at the very same event, crickets. So what explains the silence? I thought the world was ending. Is it A, no longer a threat, and, well, that's amazing. B, maybe it never really was as big a threat as they made out. Or C, could be A or B, but they don't really care because they sensed a shift in the public's appetite for it, therefore they've moved on. Either way, it exposes how morally bankrupt and shallow most who seek public office are and fill it, and of course those pulling the strings in the background. These same simpletons who were chaining themselves to trees for the cause 4 years ago are now burning Teslas. Electric cars, go figure. In the 2019 European elections, there was a green wave. Environmental parties making gains. Now, they're in decline. The most stark example of that, of course, Germany. This rejection by the vast majority of countries, particularly in Europe, of policies that do little, if nothing, to improve lives is, well, eye-opening. And to be honest, it's reassuring. Show me one example of any country that has shunned the kind of values Western civilization was founded upon, like personal freedoms and protected borders, and thrived. They don't exist. And momentum is only growing off the back of the MAGA movement. People don't necessarily want far right, but what they crave is a government that is sensible, deploys common sense, puts its people first, and preserves the way of life we know works from, well, lots of experience. The very values generations before us have fought and died to protect. So any increase of movement away from the woke progressives globally off the back of Trump is a very good thing for freedom, for democracy, and for a better life for all. Don't let the lingering lefties try and convince you otherwise. They've been exposed. They're desperate and they're panicking, and very, very much on the way out. Well, that's it for 69X Minutes, where the real stories get told. I'm Erin Molan. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to have your company. No spin, no censorship, just the truth. We'll see you next Sunday.